Have you ever felt trapped in a struggle, caged in a conflict beyond your control, battered from a battle in search of balance, wedged between a war of dueling ideologies? If you've ever been forced to play the role of peacemaker, then I've got a story for you. On today's episode of the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, we wrestle with legendary filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki's fantasy masterpiece, Princess Mononoke. This epic sheds the whimsical innocence Studio Ghibli films were known for, opting instead for a morally ambiguous tale about the tension between nature and humanity. As we will see, this is not a black and white conflict of good versus evil. Like real life, it requires nuance and understanding. But is it possible for there to be such harmony amongst God's creation? Can mutual respect and tolerance foster lasting peace? This is a story about how hatred blinds us to the empathy we are capable of having for one another. But what are the consequences of that hatred? Is it truly possible to see our fellow humans with eyes unclouded by hate? In Miyazaki's own words about Princess Mononoke, he writes, "I am not attempting to solve the entire world's problems. There can never be a happy ending in the fight between the raging gods and humans. Yet even amidst hatred and carnage, life is still worth living. It is possible for wonderful encounters and beautiful things to exist." Welcome to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, where we explore connections between the movies we love and the stories we live. We are friends and colleagues with backgrounds in storytelling, filmmaking, teaching, and narrative therapy. Join us on our quest to unlock the power of storytelling for your life. I'm Derrick Hatch.
My name is Nick Natal.
Hello, everybody. I'm Joseph Wilson.
I'm Jason Lin.
All right, what's up, everyone? It is 2025. It is a new year. Welcome. And heads are going to roll in this episode because
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
they roll a
And
lot.
arms are gonna fly.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Limbs are going to fling.
because it was sick. Like, just clean off.
Yeah.
That was my experience in the theater. Like, whoa.
Yeah. Oh, you watched it in the
Yeah,
theater?
with Derrick.
Okay, that's dope.
Yeah. We are going to start a series today called Am the Protagonist, dedicated to Nick's
The
favorite
Tenet.
movie in the whole wide world, Tenet. Yep, that's right.
You should have picked
That's right.
Someone should have picked it.
That would have been great. Oh, we missed out.
No one has lived that life.
Hang on,
this
everybody.
planet.
Hang on, everybody. We got to...
No one on this planet can connect with those characters.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, man.
Still a good movie.
It's a good, still a great movie.
Princess Mononoke. We've talked about Studio Ghibli before on this podcast. We did House Moving Castle last year.
We did.
Mm-hmm.
And so good to have another one of these on here. I chose this for my I Am the Protagonist because I saw 2020 when COVID happened and we were inside a lot. I was like, this is the year I'm going to finally watch all the Studio Ghibli films. And I was like, I've been sleeping on these. Incredibly like diverse in a lot of the different stories that they're telling. And when I got to Princess Mononoke, which is the halfway point in their filmography, it really resonated with me, and I'm going to talk about today why it resonates with me. And I've seen it many times since. I saw it with Nick in the theater one time, and that was a lot of fun. I remember that was the first time after Benjamin was born that I went out and did anything with anybody.
Aww.
So I was like, yes, let's go. Let's get out of the house
And watch a movie.
and watch a movie.
What else is there to do?
What else is there to do in life, right? Yeah, I'm going to get your guys' thoughts on it, and then I have a quote that I want to read that'll kind of set the stage for the conversation. So, Nick, your first time seeing it was in the theater with me. What was your initial reaction?
The heads flying off. And the arms flying off.
That was going to be my answer.
No, the first, I can't remember much of it from the first time. I do remember the moment where she shoots the forest god, though, because I remember in the theater, my jaw dropped. I was like, it was a pretty cool moment.
One of the things I remember you said after we got out was how, like, quiet it felt in the theater.
Yeah.
Like, we're used
That's
to
a
so
good
much
experience.
spectacle and all that, but the
Yeah.
movie is so quiet, and, like, the theater is quiet. You can hear,
Yeah.
like, a pin drop.
Mhm.
Good.
Yeah.
That's,
Shut up.
yeah, I was going to say, that's good.
Yeah. What about you, Joe?
So I guess I've seen this before because as I was watching it again,
Mhm.
like I was like, oh, I actually do remember that stuff.
Yeah.
But rewatching it for this time, it gave me a lot of Attack on Titan vibes. And I was texting that through the chat as
Mhm.
well.
A
Just-
lot of animes have been influenced by this.
Okay, yeah.
A lot.
It's the themes of like the only enemies we have are the ones we make,
Mhm.
in a sense. So after watching Attack on Titan and seeing this, I'm like, okay, this is cool. I like what we're going with, and the animation is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's cool. Awesome. Jason.
5 out of 10. I'm kidding.
Jason, go ahead.
I grew up watching Studio Ghibli films just as a kid.
Yeah.
Like Spirited Away, I watched pretty young. And and I liked it.
My daughters still get nightmares. I showed it to them way too early.
And we know why. No Face, it's that guy. But and I had also seen maybe snippets of Howl's. I think one more, but it's like I didn't grow up later in life and then come to these and go, what is this? I think the striking nature of it doesn't throw me off as much, but I'm always just fascinated by how grotesque he's able to make things, but also how beautiful in the same breath. I think first reactions was definitely about the boar and just how disgusting it was and ferocious. But I was like, okay, this is a cool duality that I'm seeing, and that takes place throughout the film. So I really liked it. Yeah, I thought it was super sick. Ashitaka's that dude. I like him. Yeah, no, it was interesting and
awesome.
Cool.
I'm sure I've seen more of his movies. I just didn't know that was the same guy because his art style seems the same, or it seems like familiar with some of the movies I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, he's incredibly pioneering in the anime industry. So there's probably some things you'll at least recognize from him.
And he's
for sure
famous for all the food looking good.
Yes. Always know
food looks
a good looking food.
I love that like anime food. It looks so like
So Derrick, you didn't come to Studio Ghibli until COVID?
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. I
know
because you have such a passion for these movies.
It's the new. Yeah, it's new. It's fresh.
It's been 5 years.
That is true.
Yeah, but I mean, compared to like
did
that
span of time just snap you into reality, Jason?
5 years.
Guys, I might have to leave the room.
I've only known Joe for 5 years.
That's wild.
That was COVID.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
that's wild.
5 years. Wow.
Before I do the letterbox, I want to read. I want to read a quote that's going to kind of set the foundation for this conversation. It comes from this book about Christian humanism, which we're going to talk about. It says, "Artists help awaken our awareness to the present reality in all its pain and hope, thereby enabling transforming vision." So this movie that we're talking about is an art piece that, even though it takes place many, many hundreds of years ago, even though it's fantasy, it awakens me to a better understanding of not only of where we at culturally right now, but even where was I in the moment that I saw the movie. And so that's what I really want to get into today. So I'm going to read the letterbox and then we'll get into this.
Letterbox.
The fate of the world rests on the courage of one warrior. Ashitaka, a prince of the disappearing Emishi people, is cursed by a demonized boar god and must journey to the west to find a cure. Along the way, he encounters San, a young human woman fighting to protect the forest, and Lady Eboshi, who is trying to destroy it. Ashitaka must find a way to bring balance to this conflict. So I could have picked this film for the politics. I could have picked it for religion. I've been trying to figure out how to get it in for a long time, but I think this series here, I think definitely is going to fit well for it.
Okay.
So time for context to come out for a couple minutes.
Please.
So
do your job.
Phone book, I might need you to back me up on this. There's a lot of Japanese names here. Okay. All right. So this is definitely a huge turning point for Miyazaki. And I've talked about before how like we have different directors that have a film that they're working towards all their career, right? I think this is the film that Miyazaki was working towards ever since the early 80s when he was trying to develop his ideas for films. His first Ghibli film is Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. It was like a prototype for what Princess Mononoke is going to be. He expanded and wrote this manga well over a decade. Once he finished that, he felt burdened because he felt like he hadn't quite figured out how to tell this kind of story yet. But once he finished making that manga at the same time, he was like, all right, I think I can make this movie at last. And he originally conceived it as like a Japanese like Beauty and the Beast, where the princess is the beast in a way. So I think that's interesting. Okay, that's the early draft of it that you can kind of still see a little bit of that in the film.
I was kind of
she wants to be.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting her to turn into a wolf at one point.
Yeah, like, I mean, she is in some ways. She is a wolf for sure. Yeah,
got the spirit of a wolf.
Yeah, so that is interesting, right?
Running around snarling at people.
Yeah.
Reminds me of high school.
Heike, she's dope. Like she was like literally like helping her mother. Her strength,
Mhm.
like doesn't just come from her. It comes from like wanting to protect like her family.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
that's pretty dope.
So here's another interesting behind the scenes thing. So during this time of this movie, 1996, 97, Ghibli was negotiating with Disney for the distribution rights of their films in the West. They had a couple of their films that came out in America on VHS, but the films were very heavily censored. They were very heavily messed with. Even the names were changed, and they were not happy with that. And so Disney, when they signed on for this deal with Ghibli, they thought they were getting My Neighbor Totoro or Kiki's Delivery Service or something innocent, cute, and wholesome. The first film that Ghibli sends them is Princess Mononoke, and Disney has a panic attack.
You shall feel what I feel. You shall feel the fear.
That was I heard.
Yeah.
It came from a land in the West full of hate.
Yeah.
I heard that. I'm like,
Yeah, I think there are some
talking about
digs.
Disney.
I think there's some digs in this movie.
Disney is the land of
Why
iron.
did they send that one first?
Because they said whatever movie you make, right? Like we're gonna help distribute it, and that's the movie they were making. And they said, "Here you go." So Disney
I feel
panicked.
like that's on Miyazaki, bro, because he's throwing digs in the movie he's trying to give to the studio to produce.
And I respect that.
He's
trying to send that message over, yeah.
As a result, Disney shifted the movie over to Miramax, and of course, we know Miramax was owned by everyone's favorite creep, Harvey Weinstein. And who was known for his excessive creative meddling, especially with foreign films. In fact, Harvey Weinstein said he wanted to trim 45 minutes out of the movie so it could be 97 minutes with credits.
Dang.
So Miyazaki sent him a little gift in the mail. He sent him a gift, and the gift, close.
Oh, I
so
know what
the
it is.
gift,
I know what it
do you know
is.
what it is? What was it?
No cuts.
Yes, it was a sword, and attached to it was a note that said, "No cut."
Oh yeah, he's boss. That's dope.
Yes.
You're producing my whole movie and you're not going to do anything about it.
And so from Miyazaki's passive-aggressive threat,
That's what I was gonna say.
Disney has never cut.
Child.
They have never made any cut to a Ghibli film in any of the releases that they did.
So you got to set the example.
He did. He said. But it worked.
You two are proud.
It worked, and it makes a great story.
I enjoy this too. I'm with it.
So, and Weinstein got Neil Gaiman to oversee the dub, which was also a big deal at the time because of him as a writer, right? Big
Yeah,
time
Jada Pinkett
fantasy
is
writing.
what is her name?
Well,
Toki?
yeah, Toki.
Yeah, well, that's another thing too, is they cast big name actors and
Yeah.
actresses in these parts, which again, that was not common either for these animes. This was really being treated seriously. So a couple other context things is that this movie is made during the Muromachi period. So between the 1300s and the 1500s, this is where the native people, the Japanese people, like Ashitaka's tribe, they are being pushed out by those who came in from basically where modern day South Korea is today. And those are the Japanese that we know of today. And as this is happening, we're also getting the development of weapons, gunpowder, different things like that. We're starting to see, just like with Europe, with the Renaissance and eventually heading into the Enlightenment, we're heading into this period where we're moving away from Shintoism, away from that kind of animism, those spiritual kind of practices, and moving more towards the humanism that Japan is known for today. So Ashitaka, when he's forced to leave his tribe, it says he's the last prince of that indigenous people, which is those are real people there.
Okay.
And so when he goes, the tribe will not be able to continue anymore. So that's why it's a big deal that he has to leave.
I really felt that, like the weight of it when like he's leaving and they're saying our tribe has dwindled to nothing and now our only prince must cut his hair and leave. And it was just like this deep moment of shame and regret.
Yeah.
It came from, hey, I need to save this village.
Yes. It came from a good place.
Yeah. I want to save this village, and now the village it's done.
Yeah.
The line is done.
So,
Yeah,
so Derrick, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So what is your moment like that where you did something that was the right thing, but you were shunned or you had to be turned away?
I mean, I think I've talked about it before on here, but I think moving from California was kind of like a big moment like that. Where I was just leaving a lot of comfort, a lot of security and certainty, and coming out here to Florida. That's a huge moment for me, for sure. And the interesting thing also about Ashitaka is that he has to face this destiny. He has to go out into the world, right? And I do think it's also symbolic of like, okay, the old Japan has to leave and it has to go see what this new Japan that's coming, that's rising during this time period, right? So historically, there's a commentary going on there as well. This movie is supposed to explain on kind of like a different level, like what is happening to society as it transitions. And so structure-wise, this movie's really fascinating because I don't know how Miyazaki did it. Because we talk about how some stories are the hero's journey. Some are the sparklight, right? Some are this, some are that. So this movie manages to be a hero's journey, like your traditional like Star Wars or superhero film. It's also a spark line, like Do the Right Thing, Tree of Life, where it's contrasting two different ways. It's also what's called the mountain, which is where we're building tension. And then we have a moment where that tension pops off, right? So kind of like Tarantino uses the mountain in his stories. All packaged within that Japanese 4-act structure that we talked about on the House episode, right? The 4 different phases in Japanese storytelling. So it is all those things at once. I don't know how he did it, but it's incredible. And it's a flawless execution of all 4 of those layers of storytelling. So let's get into talking about Ashitaka. So we get the opening scene with the demon boar. What'd you guys think of that whole setup there?
That was amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Very dope. like it's just because if you're watching it for the first time, you don't know that it's a boar.
Yeah.
It's covered by these like they look like leeches, and if you're thinking of like it being a demon, like a leech, and it's sucking your actual like essence out of you.
Yeah.
Life, your actual life.
Just the footprint on the land, it just scars everything.
And so I guess Derrick,
that junk is fast too.
Yeah, and he's fast.
Goodness. That was a problem.
The hate is fast.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yes.
Yeah. It spreads so quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting because the demons, they look like worms. And it's because in a lot of Eastern, like ancient folklore, worms are a symbol of black magic or like a poisonous spell. Like something has gone awry, right? When you see these things. Miyazaki's so creative in how he can depict like, what does a demon do to a person?
Yeah.
And it's awesome because we think of worms as like eating rotting flesh, like really disgusting images. Maggots. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm like, oh, that's like a really cool visual of like what a demon is doing to you.
And it's interesting, even after they kill like the demon, they still pay respects, or the boar, they still pay respects.
Because they still see, see like what we talk about in narrative therapy is like the creature is not the problem, right? The demon is the problem and it's infecting the person. And Ashitaka, you see, he's an aspirational character. He's the warrior archetype, but he's an aspirational version of that. And so how do you make an aspirational character interesting? You give him some sort of fatal flaw, right? And so he comes into counter with the demon and it leaves this mark on him. And so now he has that demon within him. And that demon manifests as anger and hatred. And he has to learn to try to control that curse, right? These demons, they amplify hatred that's already in your heart, right? And what it does is it brings it to the surface. So when we think of anyone who has a demon, and all these characters have different demons they're fighting in some degree.
Yeah.
But the demons are simply bringing out things that are buried deep within, and they're bringing them to the surface. So there's that quote when he's getting ready to leave where the woman of the village says that you can't alter your fate, but you could rise to meet it if you choose.
That's a good line.
Yeah. And I love that because Ashitaka knows he's going to die, but he still wants to do something meaningful. He wants to live a meaningful story despite the fact that he has to bear this mark, right? You'll see that every character that we talk about is acting out of a place of pain. And even Ashitaka, there's a place of pain that comes out when he acts as well. But everybody thinks they have it figured out, but Ashitaka's unique because his challenge is to go out and to see with eyes unclouded by hate. So in other words, to try to have an objective perception of what's really going on, because everybody thinks they're right? Like even in just real life, like we all think like we've got the story, we've got it figured out, and we've only got a piece of the puzzle. Ashitaka's job is to go out and see the whole puzzle. And it's really an avatar for the audience because Miyazaki is saying like, you as the audience, can you see the characters in this movie with eyes unclouded by hate. Because we come to Princess Mononoke warring off our own demons. We're going to enter the forest, we're going to enter Irontown, and it's going to challenge us to see these things. Once he gets out there, we see that he really is a good listener, right? He starts listening to everyone. And you start to see already that there's a certain jadedness that's set in with a lot of these characters. And you see the first encounter with the samurais, right? When he's riding out, when the heads start to roll, the limbs start to flap off. You see that the anger, the demon is releasing that anger that's welled up within him. And the people, you remember what they say after they see him for the first time?
He fought like a demon.
He fought like a demon, yeah. After that, he goes and sees a Jigo. He's the monk character, right?
Yeah, Jigo.
Yeah.
Jigo. It's interesting because he recognizes him and already knew who he was, that he was like someone from an endangered tribe. So he was already kind of working his schemes, kind of in a way using this person that I would say like is connected enough to actually lead him to his prize and is using him for his own personal gain.
Yeah, he is a manipulator. But here's where we as a Western audience get lost in translation, right? So when we're first introduced to Jigo, he does seem like a nice guy. But if you notice, they're not showing his feet for a while. And you're like thinking that's odd. Like his feet are purposefully cut off from the shot.
Is that like a concealment of who a character is?
Yes, because the shoes he's wearing actually reveal who he really is. So there's a demon in Japanese mythology that wears...
The Tengu?
Yes, you know what I'm talking about.
I know a little bit.
Yes,
It's
okay.
I can't remember. Not Guido sandals, are they? I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, I forget the name too, but basically these sandals that they wear, so these demons are shapeshifters. They can appear in any form, and they're actually known to be in the folklore that they were reincarnated monks who failed in their life on Earth here. So they have to become reincarnated as these like demon figures, right? Which is really interesting. So they shapeshift so you can never tell who they really are.
Yeah.
But they always wear the same shoes. So Jigo, they purposefully hide the shoes, and then there's a moment where Jigo starts leaping in front of Ashitaka, and it reveals the shoes. Now, if you're a Japanese audience, you're like, we know where this is going. Ashitaka's following the demon, right?
Okay.
Oh, and one other thing as well is we also see Jigo later, he's disguised as a boar. Remember, he wears the boar skin over him. But one thing that he says that I think is correct is that he says this whole world is under a curse. And there's this idea in Japan called tatari, which is basically like a curse that comes over someone or a land out of bitter resentment. The boar that gets shot with the bullet and the demon that comes over, that's an example of tatari there, right? Anyone who has the demon in them, but also... It's ironic because Ashitaka bears like a literal like marking of Tatari, but characters like Lady Eboshi and San, who I would also argue have a demon in them, Ashitaka even says there's a demon inside you both. They're also operating under the spirit of Tatari, even if it's not like manifesting in some way. That's something that we have to think about is like all of the things we're seeing, it's a fallen world, right? That's like basically the Japanese way of saying that. Is that this is a fallen world. So the question is, in a fallen world, can we actually see with eyes unclouded by hate? I would say the tension that we've got in this film is between what's called the mythos and the logos. So the mythos represents like, you know, the sacred, the narrative, like that reality of things. And the logos, which means logic, right? It represents like the secular, the humanist, like these different things here. So you're going to see the tension between the mythos of the forest and the logos of the Irontown. And there's a quote that I wanted to read here because this is obviously an environmentalist movie in a lot of ways, right? So in this quote here, it says, in the current struggle to save the environment, the Christian community can insist that human beings, while indeed part of nature, are called by the Creator to live in harmony with creation, to be responsible stewards of its riches and not exploiters. When human beings claim to be free from any responsibility toward transcendent authority, they are tempted to arrogate for themselves the right to plunder the earth. The disastrous results of that attitude are plain for all to see. And that's Lady Eboshi. That's Irontown right there, summed up in that quote. That's what's happening there. Lady Eboshi and the people of Irontown, they love humanity. They love their neighbor. They thrive on that, but they hate God.
Yeah.
Which is really weird.
Yes.
They exploit
It's
and
split.
subjugate.
It's split when it shouldn't be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is, right, is they have when you go to Irontown, there's a lot of things to admire there.
Yeah,
When
exactly. Because
yeah.
it's not built on any type of malice. It's not built as to be like a war zone or anything like that.
It's
They
not
are
built on slavery
Yeah,
either, which is a big
exactly.
deal at this time.
Like, no, the women came from brothels. Like they were given
Yeah.
a new opportunity to actually like work and put their hands to something and make something for themselves. But
Yeah.
still leading to hatred, as you say, like a hatred towards God.
She took in lepers.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Everything
And-
they're doing is Christian, but
Yeah.
what can you just kind of explain what says that they hate God? Besides them trying to kill the forest spirit, like what is really?
So we got to understand again, like God is not going to be in our terms, right? In
Mhm.
terms of what we think of God. But like in Shintoism, it's believed that like different animals, different creatures, they inhabit a spirit that is of God, right? And so the forest spirit is kind of like at the top of that chain. And their whole mission, as we're going to see, is they want to kill God. And I think that's also on a meta level something Miyazaki's saying about society that's happening.
And it's interesting because it's not the whole Irontown that wants to kill God, though. It's the leadership that
Right.
wants to kill God.
Right.
And
I guess what I'm confused at is they want to kill God, but they want to bring in a life that is godly.
Yes,
I
that
think
is
that's-
interesting,
I think
right?
that's-
I
that's
agree.
why-
Yeah.
That's
Uh-huh.
why I'm having a hard time believing they want to kill God.
But it's
other than them just trying to kill the forest spirit.
But
Well-
again, that's us doing it in our own strength. We may be trying to act godly, but without God, it's still
Well-
nothing.
well,
It's still from ourselves.
It's like
Like she's
believing
literally
in-
cleansing lepers.
yeah.
Mhm.
yes.
It's
Giving
very
purpose.
Christ-like.
Sorry.
But it's like it's like saying that only comes from humanity, but
Mhm.
rejecting the spirit.
Mhm.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Like saying the spirit has nothing to do with it. God has nothing to do with it.
This is from
Human kindness is only from
It's-
humanity.
Yeah.
It's not divinely inspired.
It's
Yeah.
humanism. If you look at a lot of the tenets of humanism as Christians, you'd agree with them. They're all good things, right?
Yeah.
About loving humanity. But it's taking the divine out of the equation. It's taking that out and only focusing on the human. Miyazaki said that Lady Eboshi creates a humanitarian utopia for the outcasts. She buys contracts for prostitutes. She houses leopards. It looks like Christ's compassion, and it's beautiful. And you can't go to Irontown and see Lady Eboshi as the villain in the movie.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard because you see there's so much good that's happening there. But in order to sustain this utopia, they have to burn down the forest. They have to destroy these creatures, right? And that to me is so profound that you can do the things that Christ called you to do, but you have to, at the same time, compromise something that is integral of what it means to live in God's world, in God's creation there. But Lady Eboshi truly believes, like, she wants her people, they want the blood of the forest spirit, right? So there's a lot of beheading in this movie, which is interesting because Ashitaka has seen beheading people, and now Lady Eboshi wants the head of the forest spirit. The emperor wants the head of the forest spirit, and the forest wants a head too, which is interesting. I'll get to that in a moment, though. You know, when you get to like Nietzsche, like you guys are familiar with Nietzsche, right? The philosopher. And so Nietzsche is the one who coined the phrase like the death of God at the turn of the century. And so Nietzsche was the one who was predicting like the way society is going, we are going to sever our roots from religion, from God, right? We're going to try to create this humanitarian utopia, but we're going to lose something when we try to create it. And that leads to modernity and postmodernity, where we find ourselves today, right? And this is something that's really big for Miyazaki, because Miyazaki laments of how we have cut ourselves off from our spiritual connection with the divine. That is a major theme in a lot of his films. But again, you see it's technology, right? Because Irontown, their identity as a town is placed in technology, in the iron, right? So in her eyes, it's better for the trees to die than for people to not be rescued. And it's hard for me to disagree with that, right?
Who are the good guys? Who's really a bad guy?
Right.
We're all just people. And now we're just over here just slaughtering each other.
One of my favorite scenes that you made me think of is when Ashitaka's in the room with the lepers and he's angry and he wants to kill Lady Eboshi right there on the spot. I'd kill you if it would lift this curse. But then Lady Eboshi says, but I'd have to kill everyone in order to be satisfied. And then the leper says, she's the only one who has ever seen us as human beings.
Yeah.
That scene, again, like with what you're talking about there, right? It's like, okay, seeing with eyes unclouded by hate. Because Eboshi and her people are responsible for the boar, which is responsible for the curse that Ashitaka bears.
Set up that they're the villain.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like you're supposed to look at her as the villain, and then that happens.
Yeah.
But she's still a person. Even after she kills, after she kills the deer god. I don't know the names of them.
Yeah.
But
the forest spirit.
The main forest spirit. They still take her in, or there's still forgiveness there.
Yeah.
The leper says, to parallel Jigo's words earlier, he says the world is cursed, but we find reasons to keep living. And I feel like that statement is what Miyazaki's trying to say in the whole movie. In that one sentence.
And then he says, what do I know?
I
don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's definitely Miyazaki in a meta way, like
funny
getting in there.
What's interesting, I think, like he's challenging us to see these characters with eyes unclouded by hate.
Yes.
Because it's very easy to go in and say, oh, they're evil.
Yep.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're not wholly evil.
America's evil.
But we're not wholly evil.
Yeah.
So maybe Miyazaki doesn't hate America.
Yeah.
But he's still pointing out that America has...
Yeah. Iron Town.
Wait, side note, the funniest line of this movie came from the leopards when Irontown was being attacked. And then one of them shoots at the boat, and he's like, I missed. And it's the one-eye leopard.
I didn't even notice. That's hilarious.
Like, that's perfect.
That's awesome.
cinema right there.
Switch him.
So good. The last thing I'll say on Lady Eboshi here before we get to San is that Miyazaki said in this interview about Lady Eboshi that she's a character who bears the scars of profound trauma without giving up, but has a force of her will so strong that it kills God. Then we get San in the picture, the Princess Mononoke, who we are first introduced to sucking blood out of her mom, the wolf.
Hardcore.
And what is
anyone like that?
That's like the iconic shot of the movie, right?
Please keep that in.
So Eboshi says that the wolf god stole San's humanity, and that now she is only the Princess Mononoke. So Mononoke is an interesting word. Princess is obviously a human term, right? But Mononoke is a term that means like a bad spirit of sort. So like, you know how we have like superstitions, like bad omens, like things like that in our culture in the West, right? So Mononoke is kind of like that. Like if something bad happened to you, you'd be like, oh, the Mononoke's after me. Or like, I'm under a Mononoke curse. Like something like that, right? So
Satan's doing something today.
Yep. There it is.
So to make that a princess is pretty interesting then.
Yes, because Mononoke, it just means spirit, but it has a connotation of like something that's vengeful, something that's trying to get you, right? And so that's how she's defined. And that's actually how Lady Eboshi defines her, which is interesting there. And so when we meet San is the counterpoint. She's the paradox, the foil to Lady Eboshi. Whereas Lady Eboshi loves humanity, loves her neighbor, but hates God. San loves God, so to speak, loves the sacred, but hates humanity. Yes. So she's the other, bless you.
Thank you.
So she's the other half of the puzzle there, right? So we see that when she comes, they have that fight on where she comes into Irontown and she has the fight.
And Irontown is like, kill her.
Yes.
Get
And
her.
you see that hatred coming out in everybody. And both of these sides of Eboshi, San, they just keep going back and forth trying to get revenge on each other. And Ashitaka stands in the middle of them and holds them back. He has no fear in this conflict. And he says, there's a demon inside you. look, everyone, this is what hatred looks like when it catches hold of you. And he confesses that that same hatred is eating him alive. It's going to kill him.
Yeah, that kind of like aura, demon aura. That was sick. Yeah, that was sick.
Yeah.
Everyone hears that and then like does not even respond.
So it's such an incredible character thing because on the one hand, we're hearing out of Ashitaka's mouth one thing. We're hearing him say like something that's good, but the demon aura around him is growing, and which means he is angry, right? It's a way of showing that anger is starting to come out. But it's starting to come on, and he has to try to control it.
But that's what, like the Lord says, be angry, but do not sin. He's not sinning in his anger. There is an anger.
It's very difficult.
Yeah, you have emotions. You can be frustrated, but don't act out in that frustration. They're acting out in that hatred.
Yes.
And that's the difference, I think. Because again, it is, I guess, showing up, but he's not acting out on it.
And this is where I really, really relate heavily to Ashitaka. So besides the fact that I mean, have you guys ever felt like you were torn between two different like allegiances in some way, like two different groups of people, and you were the one trying to hold things together?
No allegiance.
Have you guys ever felt like that though before?
Yes.
Yeah. So for me, it is this idea of what we would call Christian, the sacred, and like the humanist and the secular. So I wasn't raised Christian. I wasn't raised religious in any way. But when I became a Christian, I immersed myself in that world for a number of years, trying to understand the theology, the people, the church, right? All these different things. And one of the interesting things I had heard over the years is just the way that in some ways the church is afraid of the world. Like we're afraid of culture. We're afraid of the secular, right? We're afraid, and we demonize those things that we don't fully understand or think they're quote unquote Christian. And so when you look at my office, like right on the two sides of my wall, like on my desk is in the middle. On one side is my bachelor's degree in like Christian, like ministry and theology, right? And that represents that time of my life when I was like really immersed in that world. The other side represents my master's in narrative therapy. And so I went from going to a really conservative, closed off Christian school to one of the most secular, liberal universities in the whole world. And that's the University of Melbourne in Australia, right? In a program that had nothing to do with God whatsoever. And something that a lot of Christians are afraid of, like narrative therapy, that's postmodern, that's this, that's new age. It's a lot of different things, right? And so when I was in 2020 and watching this movie, this was the peak of how I felt torn between these worlds. I was on my way to pursuing a master's degree in narrative therapy, which that's what I did the next year in 2021. And I felt like I was over here and I had this like Christian side of my life and I could understand it and all that. And I had this other side of my life that was more what you would call like humanist, secular, narrative therapy, right? Like all these different things. And I felt torn because I felt like the two sides were warring in me, but also like externally as well. And I was trying to just understand where everybody's coming from, you know, and trying not to demonize anybody, trying to like integrate and find common ground. And so, and even the place I was working with at this time, which was a Christian organization, I was feeling a tension as well because half of the staff was in this one place and they thought this way about things. And then the other half of the staff thought this way about things. And I felt like I was the one who was going back and forth trying to understand everybody. Even my own boss and the CEO were at odds with each other. And I was put in the middle of that conflict. And I was trying with all these things to see with eyes unclouded by hate. But deep down, like you guys might not know this about me, but I have a lot of anger I carry with me. And unfortunately, I didn't learn how to get that out in a healthy way as a kid. I didn't have a good model of that. And so that anger seeps out in other ways. It seeps out with me getting frustrated with my kids, right? It seeps out with my wife, the harshness that I could talk to her. And it's interesting because it's not that I'm always angry at them, but it's that I'm carrying the curse. I'm carrying the anger within, and I'm trying to hold it back, but it keeps bubbling around me like Ashitaka.
It came out on that iguana.
It did come out on that iguana, yeah. And it terrified me. It hurts because I feel like I've listened to so many people and heard so many things. And I feel like I've always like been pulled in different directions by different people. And I feel like there was an anger brewing inside of me all that time because I was sometimes afraid to be honest with the other side, right? Afraid, to fully stand on my Christian faith or fully afraid to like say, hey, I think this thing is good here, right? Even if it's not Christian. And I just carried all this anger with me. And so I felt like when I saw this movie, that was the peak of that in my life, when I just felt so torn between those two sides of me, where I had people in my narrative therapy program who were some of the most compassionate, nicest, amazing humans. And the things they were doing for humanity were on another level. But some of them wanted nothing to do with God. Some of them, I even had an advisor told me, like, you are wasting time by talking to people about God. Like, in terms of like, my practice and whatnot. And that hurt. And at the same time, I've been in church environments where we are all about worship. We are all about the word and all that stuff. But what are we doing for humanity? What are we doing? We love God, but how are we loving our neighbor? And so that's the tension I find myself in. And that's why I relate so hard to this movie as we're here. So any thoughts on that before we kind of talk about where it goes with the forest spirit and whatnot?
Yeah, no, I thought that was, that's really making me see this movie in a different light. And I'm thinking like, and this isn't a disrespect at all, but more of a challenge. But I think of how many of my church friends have other friends that are not Christians. Like, or even seek it out or are open to friendships with others that don't see the same way. Because I was really the only one trying to follow Christ or trying to pursue a relationship with the Lord. And most of my friends did not. And I grew up that way. And I still have all those friends. And I love them and they're very dear to me. Yeah. And I didn't, push them away and they didn't push me away. Because I haven't been, I've been open about how I feel and what I believe in. And I often will see, a lot of my friends in the church that don't really hang out or, they don't have a lot of friends that are secular for lack of word. But
it's the bubbles, right? We kind of, the bubbles. We get into our silos and we stay there. And that's what I like about Ashitaka is he's willing to get out of the silo and he's willing to engage. And that's been such a core part of who I am as a person is I will go and I will try to learn and understand something. And the thing is sometimes you get criticized for it. And I remember when I was like, am I a humanist? Am I a Christian? Like, who am I, right? And I would just go and I would hang out with a bunch of people who call themselves humanist. I would talk to them. I would try to understand them. And there were people who were like, why are you doing that? That's a waste of time. Like,
they're saying the same thing to Jesus. Why is your...
Yeah. Well, and even this movie, even Princess Mononoke, which is not at all like... This is a very pagan movie in a lot of ways. Yeah. But yet, at the same time, being able to see this with eyes unclouded by preconceptions and judgments. And so, yeah, it's so good.
I think it's interesting because you say that you've just been striving to be like a peacemaker. With Matthew 5:9, it says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called sons of God.
Right.
And the fact that this movie is wrapping around someone that does have sin in their life, a demon. Yeah. But it's still being a peacemaker. And in this context would be called a son of God. The spirit of the forest came and healed him. And has been like watching him this entire time. And even, everyone was so shocked. The spirit God healed this demon boy.
He became a son. Yeah. He became a son of the forest spirit of God in that moment when he's healed. That's his resurrection there, right? Yeah.
We'll get right back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, one of the things that I really love about narrative therapy and narrative practices is that it encourages you not to define people by a singular narrative. In other words, we might see someone and just think of them as this one thing. We might define them by one narrative that we have about them. But in narrative practices, one of the things we talk about is people being multi-storied, which means that there's not actually one narrative that defines us, but there's many narratives, sometimes even clashing ones. And like Ashitaka going between Irontown and the forest, where he's listening and trying to see the good, trying to see the multi-storied layers of these different characters, of Lady Eboshi and the people of Irontown, of San and the animals in the forest. So we too are encouraged to be able to look at each other. So we too are encouraged to see one another as multi-storied creatures, more complex than we often give each other credit for. And the work that I do, the coaching, workshops, classes, all of that is founded on these different principles of narrative therapy practices. In forming this company, All Things Narrative, it was really important for me to not feel fractured, to feel holistic. It took me a while to figure out how I was going to reconcile the Christian roots of my faith with the more humanistic approach of narrative therapy. So I had to figure out how to see my own story in a multi-storied kind of way, and to allow space for all these different parts of myself to exist. But All Things Narrative really is the result of that. And even though All Things Narrative isn't a faith-based organization, my faith is integral to what I do and how I operate. And even many of the clients and groups that I work with are faith-based. And so it's just an amazing place to be in your life, where you just feel whole and you don't feel split anymore. You're like Ashitaka, you feel like you understand both sides and you're operating in a way that's congruent. And so if you want to learn more about All Things Narrative, about what it is we do, what we offer, then go ahead and check out the link in the show notes here. And in that description, you'll find a link to where you can schedule a free consultation if you just want to talk more, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your journey, and learn about what All Things Narrative can do for you. Then go ahead and feel free to schedule a time to do that as well. I would love to get to meet and connect with you. And so join me on the journey towards learning to see the good in all things, to see the full depth of our own narratives and the narratives of those we interact with. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and get back to the conversation.
It's interesting. The sides are looking at the forest spirit and marveling for the opposite reactions. The animals are going, he healed this human.
Yeah.
And the people are going, wait a minute, the forest spirit let the wolf and the boar die. They're like, wait a minute, this is different than what I expected.
Well, the forest spirit, in a quote
death.
that is very biblical, it says the forest spirit gives and takes life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the demons, they tremble in his presence. Whenever you see a demon that's there, they're kind of spazzing out when the forest spirit is around. How each character responds to that forest spirit, to God, it reveals something about them. And this is a very religious movie in a lot of ways. And I think this is how Miyazaki is working out religion. You see that a lot of people want to behead the forest spirit because they want something that the forest spirit has, but instead of worshiping and revering it, they want it for themselves. In other words, they want to take that essence and become the god, right? Which I think is also really fascinating.
That's a lot of new age stuff today, though, that you are your own god. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of beheadings, so I mentioned earlier there was that line where like the humans want the forest spirit to get that strength. When Ashitaka is with San and the apes come, do you guys remember what the apes say?
Yeah, we want to.
Oh no, they
want-
want to eat.
They
him.
want his head because they want his strength.
We want to eat the human.
It's almost the same line of dialogue that the apes have, that the Irontown people have, but just different sides.
They want the strength
One of them
the other
wants
side.
the humanity, right? The other wants the divine.
Nobody is sharing.
Yeah, nobody's
wanna
willing
come
to
together.
come together.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even in the resurrection, when Ashitaka is resurrected by the forest spirit, it doesn't remove the curse.
Yeah.
It heals him, but the curse, right? It's like Paul with like 2 Corinthians, right? He has the thorn and the thorn is not taken from him.
So he's been resurrected and he's been able to see now. Like his life has been changed, but he still has
Afflicted.
Well, and San says that like
Affliction,
if the forest spirit kept you alive, there's a reason why.
Yeah.
There's a reason why. I love that image of the forest spirit doing that, because I think that's true of life as well, is that God doesn't take these things away. There's a great quote here in this book of, we think of the spirit's work in the continuing order and beauty of the world and in the harmony of natural life, but we should also train ourselves to think of the spirit as that power which raises human life to new levels of insight and service. And I think that's what the forest spirit is doing here for Ashitaka, because we're getting this big battle that we're gearing up for. We got Akoto, the boar god, played by the great Keith David from They Live.
Mm-hmm.
But he says that he would rather risk it all than grow tired and stupid. So he's holding on to his pride in a way. And that rage. So here's the thing I love about Akoto's character. He is literally blind.
Yeah.
Literally blind. And that rage is what's blinding him because his eyes are clouded by hate. And that's what leads to the destruction of his entire clan.
My warriors.
My warriors.
Follow me.
Yes.
That part was wild.
Yeah.
Yes. Because he's just marching, marching, and the humans are disguised. They're deceiving him,
You
right?
got something here, something worse than humans.
Yes.
It is not pretty.
It'll be a crazy Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. Now, in the midst of all that, there's the scene.
Ate humans and got their strength. Oh my!
There's a scene where Ashitaka, it's at night, and he's overlooking the cliff, and Moira, is that her name? The wolf. Moro? Thank you, phone book. So Mora, who's Princess Mononoke's mom, she kind of dark hair, but she tempts him to jump off the cliff and just end his quest, give up and go home. He says, in the morning, if you're still here, I'll kill you. So yeah, she's savage,
She's
right?
hardcore.
So there's a cruelty of nature that exists as well. It's not just all like the forest people are great. Because that's the thing is it could be so easy for an environmentalist movie to make nature seem amazing.
But then she also knows, because there is a gentle side to her, because then she tells her daughter, like, he would have spent his life with you. Like, she'd tell her, like, he loved you and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a love that's blooming there.
If you took a lot of the actions of animals and said, let's have a human do this, it's despicable.
Yeah.
Right,
There's some rough, cool things out there in the natural world.
Yeah, so Ashitaka...
Which
go
is
ahead.
also interesting because humans try to give more value to animals than they do to human life. And they're just like, oh, animals wouldn't do this. Animals, it's like, no, nature is vicious.
Yeah.
Nature, birds will eat their own children to feed their children. It's like, and you want to, like, you strive to be like these animals, but you devalue humanity. There is more animal rights than there are for like a lot of human rights, and I find that very interesting.
Well, and for some people, nature and the environment becomes their religion, right? That becomes their god. So that's an interesting thing too. So Ashitaka, and the next day, there's a shot of him riding, and it's darkness. There's like clouds. It's dark all around him as he's moving further and further away from the conflict. When he turns around and he goes back to get involved, all the darkness moves away and the light starts to come down. The sunlight comes out, signifying that Ashitaka, the temptation to just run away, to just leave, right? When you're too tired to fight in the conflict, to just go, especially if somebody's encouraging you to stay out of it. But Ashitaka, the light shines down because ultimately he's got to be this mediator.
Yeah.
So Lady Eboshi becomes so determined to kill the forest spirit that the samurai start to take out Irontown. So she is so focused on her hatred that her love for her people is placed underneath as secondary.
I taught the ladies all I need to teach them. They can handle it from here.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? Our hatred, everybody's hatred comes to the forefront, and any love they have takes a back seat in that conflict. So Ashitaka is able to unite. He gets the wolf, San, some of the Irontown people. They go and they need to warn Eboshi, and that's where Eboshi's like, they'll be fine. Like, dang, these are your people. She is so focused on her hatred.
Yeah.
She's like, I need to kill this god. And she's being manipulated by Jigo, right? Which if Jigo is our demon figure, I think Jigo is a manifestation of Eboshi's demon. And Jigo's the one who's pushing her, right? To keep doing this.
Yeah.
What's interesting is what you said about the Tengu being a shape-shifting being. You said that? He morphs to basically whichever side he wants to play in the moment.
Exactly.
When he first meets Ashitaka, he's like, let's show him how fast we can run. And he's with him, and he's not really confronting him or challenging him. He's just kind of listening and getting intel.
Yeah.
The same thing, he plays both sides he plays that army and Lady Eboshi against each other.
Yeah, there's the samurai, and then there's the people of Irontown.
Yeah, and what he wants has actually nothing to do with them. He's using Lady Eboshi. He wants to ascend and be rewarded by the Emperor.
It's like, didn't he say, like, if you want to kill a god, let somebody else do it or something like that?
Yes.
Someone else do your dirty work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So he's shape-shifting throughout the movie, and he's not on any side, whether, man or nature. He is just Jigo
Right.
for him.
Yeah.
And all the
People
while
do that in
that's
real life.
And all the while that's happening, San's demon manifests in the form of Akoto's demon, because San morphs with Akoto and they become one, sucked under the demon. So Ashitaka has to try to rescue San from her demon, like physically, right?
Yeah.
Pulling her out, and has to rescue Eboshi from her demon symbolically by trying to silence the voice of Jigo. So Ashitaka is just trying to rescue people from their demons while also fighting his own demon that is trying to manifest throughout the conflict. And then, of course, we get to the heartbreaking moment where Eboshi says, "Watch closely, everyone. I'm going to show you how to kill a god of life and death. The trick is not to fear him." Miyazaki is not a Christian, but come on. I mean, really.
Yeah. And then immediately runs up to the giant deer god.
Yeah. And that moment of silence when you see the deer god, which is like this benevolent, but also like.
And it's beautiful while it's
beautiful.
transforming, like from its deer,
Yeah.
like its elk form
to the
the
Nightwalker?
Yeah, to
Yeah.
the Nightwalker.
Well, and I think one of the reasons why it's kind of disturbing a little bit in its beauty. And I think that's one of Miyazaki's like amazing things is he can make something that's beautiful, but also disturbing.
Yeah, it's weird
And it's
looking.
because the face is perfectly symmetrical. And normally in animation, we don't make things perfectly symmetrical.
Oh, really?
And I think that's psychologically like it's perfection. And then the head.
Yeah, and it's a human-like face.
Yeah.
Yes,
but
it
that's-
is.
But that's
On
also
the nature
descriptions of like
spirit.
angels in the Bible.
Yes.
Like with the eyes and the different faces that they have different heads.
That's more of that one vision. That's not all the angels.
But still, that's still a description of what beauty is like in heaven. But that's
Yeah.
still beautiful. So there's still that beauty in what people would say is kind of like weird or off.
Well,
in
and
a
when
sense.
you kill God, when you try to take the divine out of the equation, things turn into chaos. And the chaos starts to enswoop the whole land.
and everyone dies.
And it brings about a death. Like when we try to kill God, it ultimately punishes us. The wolf, in her last moment, she, by the way, bites Lady Eboshi's arm,
Yeah.
which that moment's wild. And there's
just
that.
a head.
And
She was just a head and just
Right.
bit it off.
right.
Wolf can still bite.
Yep.
Even after death.
So good. But then you have San, who just watched her God die, right? It's like watching Christ get crucified in a way. Like San is heartbroken over this. And Ashitaka's just there embracing her. And so the finale is that this is a very, very, very like ancient primitive storytelling here. We have to get the head back, right? And that's when Ashitaka is finally able to stand up to Jigo, because Jigo is, I think, ultimately the antagonist more than Eboshi. He stands up to Jigo and he's able to get the head and bring it back. So he becomes that mediator. And in Carl Jung, like Jungian theory, like the archetypes, the highest form of masculinity is to be a mediator in conflict. And that's what he would say there. So Ashitaka's journey and the thing that ultimately lifts the curse is that humanity has to make things right again, right? Humanity has to ask for that forgiveness from God and has to has to mend what's been broken there. In a lot of ways, he's like a reverse like Paul Atreides, right? Paul Atreides goes this really dark direction between the two worlds and becomes this Messiah. Ashitaka's a messianic figure too, except he becomes the mediator there. It says that only human hands can return the head. And I love that San's hands are on there too, which implies that San is embracing her humanity, right? She's no longer just the wolf girl or whatever. She's embracing her identity there as human. And so the forest spirit falls on Irontown. The human civilizations like Irontown will fall, but nature will always come back, because even with the forest spirit gone, nature still blooms. And one of the last lines of the film is that when it says, he's telling us it's time to live. And you see that even though Ashitaka's curse is fading, the forest spirit is dead. And so things can never go back to how they were. They're going to rebuild. They're going to Ashitaka's going to continue to try to do these things. But it's kind of like, you've had Christ in humanity, in the flesh, but now Christ is gone. But something new will come out of it. We'll experience the divine differently. So this is a hope on the horizon ending for sure, because there is hope. Even the little, what are they called? The kami? The little weird,
clicky things.
Well, even though they all died when the forest spirit died, the film ends with that final shot of one still left. So there's still a spark of divinity, of the sacred. Kodama, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a spark of them left. So any thoughts on the ending or final thoughts on Princess Mononoke?
It's interesting because even she still doesn't forgive the humans afterwards.
Right.
She's like, I can't forgive the humans for killing the forest god, but no, I'll come visit you.
Not everything is like completely resolved at the end.
Yeah, I like that.
Everybody knows they're going to try to do better.
Yeah.
Like that's it. You can't and I think again, what Miyazaki's saying is like, we have gotten to a place and a point of no return in our culture where we have scrubbed the sacred out of a lot of things. But that doesn't mean that life's not worth living. It doesn't mean that things can't be beautiful. It just means we have to find a new way forward.
I liked that end because it was uneasy. It is an uneasy end. It's uncertain. There's hope, but like you said, San doesn't forgive, and they're like, I have to live in the forest, and you live with the people. So I like it because of how realistic it is. So we have this, necessity for movies that end and everything's resolved, everything's good. No, like the conflict was so great. Like something insane and massive was killed.
Yeah.
And it affected everybody. And these feelings, this hatred, like all this stuff, it doesn't just wash. And you can even imagine the people like almost wanting to revert and go back to because forgetfulness is just creeps in and can slowly kill these revelations that we have.
Yeah. That's so good.
And when you read, through the Old Testament and about Israel, Kings and Chronicles, whenever Israel does evil in the sight of the Lord, it's, and the people forgot.
Yes.
Like for the people forgot and did evil are very much intertwined. So
right.
I think it's so important that when we have these revelations, this integration of, loving neighbor and others, and
you need both.
Kindness,
you need
and
love
also,
God and love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's easy to get into this integration and we have to do others, and then slowly revert back to the side that you came from.
And my integration was in 2021. I started calling myself a Christian humanist, which is why I have all these Christian humanist books I've been reading from, right? Because I do think there's something good in what humanism's trying to do, but obviously also I'm a Christian, right? That's part of my identity. And so what is it like to live in that tension? I think it's tension I live in every day, I'm on staff at a church, but I'm also a narrative therapy practitioner. I think I've embraced that tension in my life. And as I've done that, my anger has actually dissipated in a lot of ways. Because now I feel like I'm no longer torn back and forth between Irontown and the forest. I'm no longer torn between the secular and the sacred. I found in my life how to embrace both things because I see the value in them. I literally found this book, which is amazing. Interweavings, conversations between narrative therapy and Christian faith.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
This was actually this was the turning point. Reading this book.
Did you write that?
I wish.
I was like, Derrick out here just promoting a new book he just wrote.
This is
Right?
precision right here.
This book was
That's
a turning
cool.
point though, because I realized
That's a gift.
Yeah.
it is a gift. And I realized that I don't have to live fractured in my identity.
Yeah.
I don't have to try to be something to somebody when I'm at church. I don't have to try to be this way when I'm with this group of people here, conservative, progressive, all these different things that I've experienced in my life. I've learned to see the value and listen, because that's a big thing, right? Are we listening to one another? Are we able to see with eyes unclouded by hate? That's been my journey. That's why Princess Mononoke, along with Pinocchio, Logan, and Tree of Life, is the last in my top 4 on Letterboxd. It's one of my favorite movies, and I love it, and it speaks to me in so many ways, and so thank you guys for letting me share on it
Yeah.
here. So
Thank you, Derrick, for sharing.
Any final thoughts, anyone, before?
I think all the connection between all of our movies, and I feel like with all of our lives connecting to the movies, is embracing something.
Yeah.
Whether it's embracing passions.
The thing listening to Derrick is so cool because as I'm listening, I'm clarifying my own story because we're struggling with such similar things.
Yeah.
And for me, it could be summed up in Toto in the Altar Boy outfit.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yes.
They're
companions.
It is the same secular versus Christian kind of struggle. And one of the cool things that I learned watching this film, because I struggle with Miyazaki films, is the same struggle that I have is I need a white hat and a black hat. And there is none in that structure with this Eastern storytelling. It's the idea of that soft world building and hard world building they showed me, which I'm surprised you didn't bring up.
Yeah.
But the rules in certain storytelling demand concrete structure.
Rules, yeah.
And Miyazaki throws that out the window so that you can focus on the character more. And so as I've studied that and listened to Derrick, now kind of Princess Mononoke comes alive more than like this silent movie theater where it's unstructured. If I'm unanchored in an unstructured story, then I'm lost. Can't find it.
Yeah.
So it's cool. I've become to get more anchored in that way.
Well, and it's yin and yang as well, right? When you look at the yin yang symbol, you see the black, but there's a little bit of the white in it. And you see the white and there's a little bit of black. The things that we don't like in other people, there's a little bit of that in us as well.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
great. I want to end with this quote by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs that I think sums up where you go from here after this movie, where he says, "The test of faith is whether I can make space for difference. Can I recognize God's image in someone who is not in my image, whose language, faith, ideals are different from my own? If I cannot, then I have made God in my image instead of allowing him to remake me in his. To see with eyes unclouded by hate is to have God purify our hearts and give us more clear vision in our relationships and in our connections with those around us."
Thank you for listening to the Live a Meaningful Story podcast, produced by All Things Narrative. If you'd like to learn more about our coaching, workshops, events, please check out allthingsnarrative.com. You can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at All Things Narrative. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and tune in next time as we continue exploring the stories we love and the stories we live. Take care.